My name is Serena Fowler, and I'm 29 years old. 3 hours before my wedding, my mother was pounding on the locked gate, screaming that I'd betrayed my family. I planned everything in secret, 7 months of phone calls, vendor meetings, handwritten invitations, 47 guests, a private garden, my grandfather walking me down the aisle. My parents weren't invited. My sister wasn't invited. For 7 months, every single person I trusted kept their mouth shut. Then my cousin posted an Instagram story. 2 minutes, that's all it took. My mom saw it, got in her car, and drove 45 minutes in a rage. She showed up at the gate, fists slamming against iron, and what my grandfather, my mom's own father, said to her face that day is the reason she drove away in silence. That's why I'm telling you this story. Please like and subscribe if this resonates with you. My parents divorced when I was 12. My mother Diane raised us alone and she never let anyone forget it. Every Thanksgiving grace, every church potluck, she'd remind us, I did this by myself, no help, no safety net. She kept us fed, clothed, in after-school programs, but the sacrifice became currency, and she spent it unevenly. My sister Brooke was the return on investment. Straight A's, sorority, married a litigation attorney at 26 in a ceremony my mother planned down to the napkin rings. Brooke did everything Diane's way. I didn't. I chose accounting instead of law. I moved into my own apartment at 22 with money I saved from waitressing. Every decision I made got corrected. The car was too old. The apartment was in the wrong neighborhood. The way I dressed for church was too casual. And every correction came wrapped in the same phrase. I'm only saying this because I love you. Brooke heard different words. I'm so proud of you, Brooke. My mother said at every holiday, every birthday, always loud enough for the whole table to hear. She never said it to me, not once. I spent years waiting to hear those words. I was 25 before I stopped waiting. I met Joel Tanner at the farmer's market 4 years ago. He had a booth with handmade bookshelves, cutting boards, small tables. His hands were rough and calloused, his smile easy, his prices fair. We talked for 40 minutes about books. I forgot to buy vegetables. Joel owns a woodworking shop on the edge of town. Custom furniture, dining tables, bed frames, cabinets. He taught himself through a community college program, built his client list by word of mouth, and paid off his house by 30. He's not flashy. He drives a 10-year-old truck and wears the same 3 flannels. But he's steady. He shows up. He listens. The first time I brought him to meet my mother, she opened the door, smiled and said, "So nice to finally meet you." Then she asked where he went to school. When he said community college, she didn't say another word to him for the rest of dinner. That night she called me. "Serena, you can do better than that." I told her Joel was kind and hardworking, and that I loved him. She said, "Love doesn't pay the mortgage, sweetheart." Joel already owned his house outright. I didn't bother telling her. For 3 years I thought she'd come around. I brought Joel to holidays, to Sunday dinners, to my niece's birthday parties. My mother tolerated him the way you tolerate a stain on the couch you're too polite to mention. But she never warmed. She never asked him about his work, his family, his life. It took 3 years to understand that my mother's problem with Joel had nothing to do with Joel. Joel proposed in his workshop on a Tuesday evening. There was sawdust floating in the air, the lathe still warm, and a ring on a wooden stand he'd turned from walnut. The band was walnut and silver. He'd made it himself. I said yes before he finished asking. I called my mother from the truck. 8 seconds of silence. Then "I hope you know what you're doing." No congratulations, no joy. Brooke texted an hour later. "Congrats, I guess. Have you thought about a prenup?" Within a week my mother called Aunt Ruth, Uncle Davis, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. The message was always the same: Serena's engaged to a carpenter, pray for her. Then she called my father, the man she hadn't spoken to in 8 years. She told him, "Your daughter is about to make the same mistake I did." Christmas dinner arrived. My mother's house, 15 people around a table too small for 15. Joel brought a wine rack he'd built from reclaimed oak with dovetailed joints, 3 weeks of work. My mother unwrapped it and said, "Oh, handmade, how resourceful." Brooke covered her mouth but the laugh slipped through. Dinner moved forward. Then my mother turned to Joel and said, "So Joel, when Serena has children, are you going to build the crib yourself too, or can you actually afford to buy one?" The table went silent. 15 people, and not one of them breathed. Joel set down his napkin and looked at my mother without saying a word. At the head of the table my grandfather Walter stared at Diane. Then he pushed his chair back and walked out of the room. I held Joel's hand so tight my knuckles ached. We left 20 minutes later. I cried in the truck the whole way home. That night at 11 p.m., my phone rang. Grandpa Walter. I saw it. I'm sorry. Never again. I sat on the edge of my bed and cried. Not the quiet kind, the kind that comes from years of holding it together while someone chips away at you. Grandpa, it's fine. It's not fine. I sat there tonight and watched my daughter humiliate a good man at my table. I should have opened my mouth. I didn't. That won't happen again. In 29 years, no one in my family had ever said those words to me. That what happened was real. That it wasn't in my head. Whatever you decide about your wedding, I'll be there front row, he said before hanging up. I stared at the ceiling and felt something shift. Not a decision yet, but the ground under a decision. The first solid ground I'd felt in years. January came. I called my mother and invited her to dress shopping. She agreed. I found a bridal boutique in Ridgewood and picked out 3 dresses. I stepped out in my favorite, a crepe dress with a lace hem that hit just below the knee. My mother looked at me for 5 seconds. That looks like a sundress, Serena, not a wedding gown. She checked her phone, gathered her purse, and left 20 minutes after arriving. Didn't say goodbye. 1 week later she called. If you marry Joel, I will stand up during the ceremony and object. I will not sit there and pretend this is okay. Mom, objections aren't legally. I don't care about legal. I care about everyone seeing that at least one person in this family has the courage to speak the truth. That phone call was January 14th. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, created a new folder, and typed 2 words, Plan B. I spent a week staring at that folder. I needed to be honest about what was at stake. Not just the wedding, but everything after. If I gave in, my mother would own every milestone from here forward. If she could veto my husband, she could veto anything. If I fought her publicly, I'd be the villain, the ungrateful daughter. If I did nothing, my mother would stand up at my wedding and call my marriage a mistake, just like she'd threatened. Joel never said, choose me or your family, but I could see it in his eyes. The way he slept lighter. The way he'd go quiet for long stretches in his workshop. One night, he set down his chisel. I'm not going anywhere, but I need you to decide what kind of life you want. One where your mother has veto power, or one where she doesn't. The next morning, I opened the folder and started typing. I booked a private garden estate called Whitfield House for October 11th. Iron gate, stone walls, hedges thick enough to muffle sound. 47 guests built on trust. Friends from work, my college roommate, Joel's family, and only cousins who'd never report back to Diane. Every invitation went out by hand with one line in red ink. This is a private celebration. Please do not share on social media until after the ceremony. All 47 agreed. Pastor Elaine Webb knew me since I'd joined the congregation at 23. When I called and explained, there was a long pause. Serena, are you sure about this? My mother promised to object at the altar. Another pause. What time do you need me there? The last call was to my grandfather. Grandpa, would you walk me down the aisle? 3 seconds of silence. I've been waiting for you to ask. Joel and I covered everything ourselves. $8,000. Garden venue. Catering. Photographer. Flowers. Joel built the arbor from reclaimed wood in his shop. I bought my dress alone. The teal-length crepe one. The sundress. For 7 months, 47 people kept a secret. Then my cousin Megan posted an Instagram story. 2 minutes. 7 months and my mother already had a screenshot. I'm standing in that garden, phone in my hand and my stomach drops. I called Joel first. My mom knows. He was at the shop loading the arbor into his truck. How long do we have? 45 minutes. Call the venue manager. Lock the front gate. Tell Pastor Elaine we're moving up 30 minutes. Done. What else? Get here. I dialed Pastor Elaine. She answered on the first ring, already at the venue in her robes. How far away is she? 45 minutes. Then we have 45 minutes, I'll be ready. The last call was to Grandpa Walter. He picked up immediately. Grandpa, Mom found out, she's coming. 2 seconds of silence. I'll handle it. Grandpa, you get dressed. You put on that dress and you walk out to that garden. I'll handle your mother. I stood in the early light, surrounded by white chairs and string lights. And I believed him. The bridal room was a small cottage at the back of the garden. My best friend Claire was already there, steaming the hem of the dress she didn't know existed until 6 months ago. How are we doing? She asked. My mother's on her way. Do you want to move things up? Already done. 30 minutes early. Joel's handling it. She nodded and held out the dress. I stepped into it. Teal-length crepe. The lace hem my mother had called a sundress. Claire zipped the back. I turned to face the mirror. I looked like me. Just me. In a dress I chose. In a venue I booked. On a morning I'd planned down to the last flower. A knock at the door. Grandpa Walter stepped in. Gray suit. White shirt. A small sprig of lavender pinned to his lapel. His shoes were polished. His back was straight. He looked 10 years younger than 78. He stopped in the doorway and stared at me. His eyes went red at the rims. "You look just like your grandmother." I crossed the room and took his hand. His fingers were warm, thin, steady. He squeezed once. She would have loved this. She would have loved Joel. I know. He pulled a folded handkerchief from his breast pocket, pressed it briefly to his eyes, and tucked it back. Then he offered me his arm. "Ready?" Through the window I could see the garden, 47 people in their chairs. Joel standing beneath the arbor he'd built. String lights waiting for evening. "Ready?" The garden doors opened. Grandpa Walter and I stepped onto the stone path. 47 faces turned toward us. Some were smiling. Some were already crying. Joel stood beneath the arbor, his suit navy, his shoes borrowed, his eyes wet. Walter placed my hand into Joel's, held it there for a moment, and looked at him directly, firmly, with something that resembled a transfer of trust. Joel nodded once. "Thank you, sir." Walter squeezed both our hands and stepped to his seat in the front row. Pastor Elaine smiled. "Who gives this woman to be married?" Walter stood. "Her grandfather does," proudly. A ripple of soft laughter. Joel took my hands. Pastor Elaine nodded. "We'll begin with the groom's vows." Joel's voice was steady. "I don't have a lot of fancy words. I'm better with my hands, but I promise you this. I will show up every single day. I will build the life you deserve, and I'll never ask you to be anyone other than who you are." Then behind us, beyond the garden wall, the slam of a car door. Then another. Then the sound of heels on gravel, moving fast. The iron gate shook. "Serena, open this gate." 47 heads turned. The string quartet stopped mid-bow. A child grabbed her mother's arm. My mother's voice came through the stone and iron. Sharp, certain, louder than anything else. "You are getting married without your own mother. Do you know how that makes me look?" Through the iron bars, I could see her. Navy blouse, white knuckles, mascara running. Behind her, Brooke stood with her arms crossed. Joel's hand found my shoulder, warm and steady. I felt my feet start to move toward the gate. Toward her voice. Toward 29 years of conditioning that said, "When your mother calls, you go." Then a hand touched my other shoulder, gentle and familiar. I turned. Grandpa Walter was standing behind me. His face was calm. His eyes were clear. "Sit down, sweetheart. This one's mine." He straightened his lapel, adjusted the lavender sprig, and walked slowly and deliberately toward the iron gate. Each step landed like a sentence. 47 people watched him go. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. The only sound was his shoes on the stone path. He reached the gate and stood 2 feet from his daughter. Diane stared at him, her hands dropped from the bars. "Dad, you knew about this." Walter didn't blink. "I didn't just know, Diane. I walked her down the aisle because you made yourself unworthy of doing it." My mother's mouth opened. Nothing came out for 3 full seconds. "How dare you?" Walter raised one hand. Not fast, not angry, just enough. The same gesture that had silenced 30 years of 10th graders. "I'm not finished. I spent 34 years teaching children to treat people with basic decency. I raised you the same way. But somewhere along the line, you became the exact kind of parent I spent my life trying not to be." His voice never rose. Every word carried weight because he'd used so few of them in 78 years. "You belittle. You control. You punish your daughter for choosing a good man who works with his hands. You told her his ring wasn't good enough. You promised to stand up at her wedding and humiliate her. You left me no choice." Diane's face crumpled. Real tears, the kind she couldn't weaponize, slid down her cheeks. "Dad, I was trying to protect her." "No, you were trying to control her. There's a difference, and until you learn it, she's right to keep her distance." He paused. "Let the silence settle. Today I walked your daughter down the aisle, because her own parents made themselves unworthy of the honor. That is not her shame, Diane. It's yours." He looked at her one more moment. Then he turned slowly and walked back toward the garden. He didn't look back. Diane stood at the gate for 10 seconds, maybe longer. Her hands hung at her sides. The mascara had drawn 2 dark lines from her eyes to her jaw. She didn't wipe them. She didn't scream. She didn't bang on the gate again. Behind her, Brooke stepped forward and touched her arm. "Mom, let's go. People are watching." My mother looked through the gate one last time, through the iron bars, across the garden, past the rows of white chairs, and found me standing beside Joel, in a teal-length dress she'd called a sundress, under an arbor built by a man she'd called worthless, surrounded by 47 people who'd chosen to be here. She held my eyes for a moment. I held hers. Then she turned. They walked back to the car. The doors closed. The engine started. Gravel crunched beneath tires. And then it was quiet. Walter walked back up the path. His face was composed, but I could see his hand trembling slightly at his side. He passed my chair and leaned down. Now where were we? A laugh broke through the silence. Nervous, relieved, grateful. Then applause. The soft, slow kind that means we see you. Pastor Elaine stepped back to the microphone, her eyes glistening. "I believe we were at the vows." Joel took my hands. His palms were warm. His grip was sure. I read him my vows as if the world had started over. "Joel, I spent most of my life waiting for someone to tell me I was doing it right. Waiting for permission, waiting to be enough. You never made me wait. You built me a bookshelf on our second date. You built an altar for our wedding with your own hands. You carved our date into the bottom where nobody would see it because that's who you are. You put love into the parts nobody checks." His eyes were red. He blinked hard and smiled. "I don't need someone to fix my life. I need someone to stand next to me while I fix it myself. That's you. That's always been you." Pastor Elaine's voice was thick. "By the power vested in me by the state and by this community of witnesses, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Joel kissed me, and the garden erupted. 47 people on their feet. Claire ugly crying into a bouquet. Joel's dad clapping with his hands above his head. Megan, mascara destroyed, mouthing, "I'm so sorry and I love you." In the front row, Grandpa Walter sat straight back, hands folded on his lap, a white handkerchief pressed to his eyes, not clapping, just watching. The way you watch something you helped build, finally stand on its own. The reception unfolded in the garden, long tables draped in white linen, string lights switched on as the afternoon light softened. A caterer served roast chicken, herbed potatoes, and a 3-tier cake Joel's mother had baked. Joel and I opened with a first dance. No choreography, just the two of us swaying under the lights. His hand on the small of my back, my forehead against his jaw. 47 people pretending not to watch. Aunt Ruth found Joel at the bar during dinner. She took his hand in both of hers. "I'm sorry it took me this long to meet you properly. Welcome to the family." Joel looked at her. "Thank you, ma'am. That means more than you know." After dinner, as the string lights warmed to amber, Grandpa Walter stood. He didn't clink his glass or clear his throat. He just stood, and somehow the entire garden went silent within 4 seconds. He held his glass at chest height. "I taught history for 34 years. If there's one thing history teaches, it's that the people who are right don't always get to be loud. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is plan quietly and show up." He looked at me. "Serena, your grandmother would have loved today. She would have loved this garden. She would have loved Joel. And she would have told you what I'm telling you now. You did the right thing." He turned to Joel. "Take care of her, because she deserves someone who wants to, someone who builds things instead of tearing them down." Walter raised his glass. "To Serena and Joel, may your house be as solid as the man who built its furniture." 47 glasses rose. 47 voices. "To Serena and Joel." I pressed my face into Joel's shoulder and let myself cry. Not the kind I'd cried before, but the other kind. The kind that comes when something you broke yourself building finally works. It's been 4 months since my wedding. My mother and I are not close. We may never be. But we're talking on my terms, in coffee shops, on neutral ground, with the door always within reach. Joel expanded the workshop last month. Business is good. I'm studying for my CPA exam. A senior accountant is the goal. Brooke hasn't apologized. She stopped sending the passive texts, which is its own kind of progress. My father sent a card 3 months after the wedding. Inside, 4 words. "I should have been there." I put it on the bookshelf Joel built, right next to the wedding photo. It's not enough, but it's something. Grandpa Walter calls every Sunday at 9. He never asks if I regret any of it. He already knows the answer. I didn't plan my wedding in secret because I wanted revenge. I did it because I deserved one day where no one told me I was making a mistake. Where no one stood up and objected. where no one called my husband a failure. I deserved to walk down an aisle and feel joy instead of dread. That shouldn't be radical, but for some of us it is. Setting a boundary doesn't mean you stop loving someone. It means you start loving yourself enough to say, not anymore. My grandfather taught me that at the gate. The ones who truly see you, they show up, even at 78 with a bad knee and a new suit. Joel built me an arbor out of reclaimed wood. It still stands in our backyard. We drink coffee under it on Saturday mornings. The carved date is hidden underneath. The little heart nobody else would see is still there, right where he put it. Some things are just for us. This morning I sat at the kitchen table. Joel was at the counter making coffee the way he does every morning, slow and patient. Through the window, early light came in warm and golden. On the wall, the wedding photo. Me and Walter, arm in arm, walking the stone path between rows of white chairs. I look at that photo every day. Some days I see myself in the dress my mother hated. Some days I see Walter's straight back. Some days I just see the garden, the lights, the arbor, the flowers. This morning I saw all of it, and I heard his voice again, quiet and sure. Now where were we? I smiled, because that's the real question, isn't it? After the drama and the gate and the tears, where were we? We were at the vows. We were always at the vows. My wedding wasn't perfect. My mother showed up uninvited. My sister called me cold. My father sent a card 3 months late. The secret broke in 2 minutes because of an Instagram story about white chairs. But my grandfather walked me down the aisle. My husband built the altar with his hands, and 47 people kept a secret because they believed I deserved a beautiful day. That was enough. That was more than enough. And that's my story. If you stayed until the end, thank you. You're part of my 47. If you know someone who needs to hear that boundaries aren't betrayal, share this video. And if you have a boundary you've been afraid to set, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Hit subscribe, turn on the bell, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong. You deserve your own beautiful day.